Hi, guys. Welcome back to Choose Love Anyway, episode 3. Dalia and I actually recorded this when I was still in California with her, but we had some sound difficulties. So we're kind of backtracking a little bit and we're going to talk about the things that we recorded on that day. Yeah, we're just going to talk about where we're at or where we were at that day, because that was our intention, was to just show up as we are. And it was kind of a rough day, but we just wanted to talk about how we move through different emotions, different life events, moment to moment, how things change and how we cope with that. And like Dahlia said, some days we forget what the tools that we have are or how to use them. And we're taking you through a very real life, vulnerable, like what our thoughts are, how we cope with them, what we do, all of that when we go through times like that. So, Dahlia, where were you at that day?
Oh, well, first, hello, and thanks for introducing that episode beautifully. And as being so kind by saying that we were having some audio issues, but they were me issues. My headphone was falling out and I couldn't tell. Well, no, I could tell, but I didn't know it was cutting off the sound. So we were using Dina's AirPods and I don't know,
She's trying to
something.
say my ears are bigger than hers in a
No,
really
that's
nice
not.
way.
That's absolutely not at all what I'm saying. But thanks for introducing that episode. And just to add to what you're saying about this topic is we will have days where we're just talking about, a specific topic. And then it felt like that day we planned to record, but we're not in the headspace at that moment. I felt like I wanted to be honest about where we're at because I don't want to come on and pretend. And so, that day just had a lot of emotions. I'm not as in those emotions now. I'm in a different place now, but I'm going to try to access those emotions.
Just filling in whatever you can remember and like what we wanted to share and
Yeah.
what choosing love anyway is in those moments and
In
what
the
it looks
process,
like.
like, it's in the process of, like, living our life. What does it look like to do this? So that weekend, we went to New York, and, we're moving to Connecticut specifically, and we went to look for a house, and Dina stayed with our girls, which we're gonna have a separate episode probably talking about that, and I think we were including that kind of in our co-regulation episode. Dina did an amazing job. She was phenomenal with the girls, and the girls had so much fun, and it was really special, and we were so deeply grateful because that couldn't have happened without her. That was the first time we've ever left the girls. And so there was a lot of emotions I think that I was having, but I was actually generally feeling really at peace. And then we, you know, went and looked at houses. And the first day was kind of like I only found like one house that I really loved. And then the second day, there was like three houses that we fell in love with. But there was one that we definitely wanted to put an offer on. And we did. And it was our first time. This is also our first experience buying a house. We've lived in California in this beautiful little beach town. And, now that we're moving there, we can afford to buy property, but also it just feels like the right time in our life to invest. I genuinely actually still am not quite in the headspace of owning a place, but I'm getting there. It feels like a really adult thing to do. But since I've turned 30, it feels like a good time in our life. And I think it could be a really fun phase of our life. But long story short, we put in an offer, we wrote a letter. It was,
Such a cute letter, so cute. I
and
mean, the
also it
letter
was
was
just a
really
cute house.
sweet and, like, so just you, and the picture you included was really cute too, so
But we got outbid and it was a no contingencies offer. And I was disappointed. We found out that day Dina had planned to record. And I was kind of in this place where also Dina was leaving in a few days and I was getting sad about that. And so I just felt a little depressed. And I was like, okay, what do I do? Lucy had been starting to feel sick. And whenever my girls get sick, I just do get into a funk because it means that I'm limited in what we get to do because I feel like I need to keep them, home so that we don't get other kids sick and all of that stuff. And I feel like my life gets a little bit less flexible for that time. Anyway, so I took a nap at one point in that day. We just took it easy. I just let myself be sad. And also, I think in that episode, I wanted to mention one thing, which is even honestly now in hindsight, I feel a little bit silly being like, I'm allowed to feel sad about that, but also in comparison to what's happening in the world. And these are like very, ideal issues to be having in comparison to what it could be. And I don't mean to like minimize, and I don't think anybody should minimize because you only know what you experience. And I don't think it's fair to diminish your own discomforts by saying, well, someone else has it worse. I think perspective is helpful, but I don't think it's always helpful in making you really actually feel the like extent of your emotions. It felt silly to honestly talk about it. It even feels silly to talk about it right now because also like to have the issue of which house are we going to buy because we're in a place where we can buy a house right now. That I know is not the reality for a lot of people. And I never want to come off being like, I get to check this off my list. Like, I don't, that's not how I see this, but it is a process and it's kind of hard. And it's disappointing when you have your eye on something, you can picture your family being there. It was disappointing and I am still not 100% over it. I haven't found the exact place like that I'm obsessed with in the same way. But I also have hope that we'll end up in the right place and that the house that's for us is there and it's waiting for us and we're waiting for it and we will eventually cross paths.
Yeah, and it probably doesn't make it easier because like, mom and dad or everybody also really love that house, so, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. How do you not invalidate your own suffering and at the same time recognize that some of your suffering is a privilege.
Yeah.
It's kind of when people say, like, what a privilege it is to be sore, what a privilege it is to wake up early, what a privilege it is to be able to be out of breath from working out or something,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
also
absolutely.
what a privilege it is to have a hard time picking out a house and what a privilege it is to have these kind of worries. And then also, I think that's really sweet and speaks to who you are as a person is being so considerate of others too as you speak about this. So thank you for saying that. I wanted to ask you, I remember just that day watching you. You were doing your best, and I always quote this is if you have 40% to give and you give 40%, then you gave 100%. I think that's probably one of my favorite tools to use is telling myself that. And I feel like that day you probably had less to give than you usually would. And I think there's something also about that, I'm sure as a mom or having me there, and I know you're comfortable with us, you never have to do anything for me, but I'm sure sometimes it feels a little bit like, okay, how do you not give into this your ego or the pressure we put on ourselves to be perfect or to be so great. How do you feel comfortable? And how have you found comfort? How have you taught yourself to not be so go, 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 sort of? Because I think sometimes busyness is a distraction, but I think as soon as we slow down, those feelings come back in. And I think you should honor how you feel. I think you should honor your sadness, your anger. Every feeling deserves to be honored. But how do you honor them without completely disconnecting and I guess not suppressing them, or numbing them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good question. And I would love to ask you that question too after I try to answer it. I'm like, I feel like I'm talking a lot.
I started this podcast is so I could hear you speak more and so that the world gets to hear you speak more. I know I'm important too, but I'm here because the whole reason this started is because I want people to know all the things that you've taught me. So don't ever
That's
that's
really sweet.
if you speak more, even as I re-listen to our old like the podcast episodes we've already recorded, I want to like listen to every time you speak. So keep going.
That's really, really sweet. Thank you, Dina. I love you.
Love you.
Just like a disclaimer, I'm also sick. My whole family got sick, and I have a like a headache that's just like this side of my head.
You
So like if
guys
I
are
speak
literally
a little
taking
bit
turns. It was
less,
like Lucy, Mila, Derek, you.
yeah, now it's all of us together. Lucy's feeling the best out of all of us, but she started with it. So
Same. Her and I
Dina
both.
and Lucy started together. So I'm hoping it passes fast, but who knows? So I'm sorry if I seem like a little bit lower energy. I just don't want it to come off that I don't want to be here or that I'm not excited to be doing this. I'm just wanting to do this and honor this space, but also my body actually feels a certain way. In this new phase of life, I don't exactly know how to pretend all the time. And so I'm just going to be honest and say that.
Well, you're kind of answering the question at the same time as you just said
Yeah.
that, but I don't know if you realize
No,
that.
it's true. That is kind of what my answer was going to be. I just don't know how to repress anymore. And so I just know that I just have to be honest, as uncomfortable as it is. And it's kind of been the promise that I don't know, gave to myself this year is I will not pretend for the sake of anyone else anymore and the comfort of other people because, majority of my life, I would prioritize the feelings of the person that's sitting in front of me, whether that be a family member, a friend, anybody. And a lot of times that came without any effort at all. It's not like it took so much from me to do that. But as I've gone older and as I've been growing as a human and developing and kind of shedding some of my people pleasing tendencies, I think I realize how much now it's harder to do that. And so I think that I'm grateful that I have a relationship with you where I can just be myself and show you that, like, yeah, I'm disappointed or yeah, I'm sad. And I don't feel like I have to show you this upbeat, fun version of myself because I want that to be your experience with me. But it's a lot of just being honest. And also the honesty of this experience is like,
Mhm.
there's going to be disappointment in this. Buying something, finding a house, it's not this like straight line. Maybe it could be, and some things can be.
I think I know what you're trying to say. I like that you said it's not something you're checking off the list because I was just telling Brooke today, we went on a walk and we walked by my old house. And, I can't believe I was ever living in that house and I was a wife. And what if I was still in that? Would I have ever met you? Would I have met the people that I really look up to now that live two streets down? Could I have been a mom now? Where would my life be? Well, I had all of them. Like it's kind of crazy, like all the people I look up to now who have
Mhm.
all of that stuff, right? But the foundation was fear. So it was something that I was
Mm,
checking off a box, checking off the list. And honestly, it flowed. It was perfect. It was so smooth sailing. I feel like every
mm.
single thing worked out perfectly. And I think I would have taken that as a sign. And still sometimes I think I take it as a sign like, oh, this must mean it's right for me and all of
Yeah.
that. And people always say clarity over confusion. But I think sometimes it's okay to be confused. I think sometimes it's okay to not know and it's okay to not have any expectations. And actually yesterday was Gasparilla and Brooke and I went into it and we had one plan where we were gonna start. And we started there and it was just like wherever the day took us, we were gonna go. And I feel like every time I do that, actually it's such a more enjoyable experience for me than if I have a plan. And so I think you're saying in a way, being honest about how I'm feeling, honoring that, and then also not having expectations and recognizing that doing things, it's going to be hard. Like some things are going to have difficulty, some things are going to have
Yeah.
letdowns, but
Yeah,
that
yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
mean that it's like how do you recognize that and you're open to everything but you're not expecting that from like a wounded place of yours, where you expect the other
Yeah.
shoe to fall constantly.
Yeah, but you're bringing up a really good point, and maybe that's exactly what it is. That's why I can't figure out how to explain it. I think I've just gotten to a place where I'm surrendering control because to resist not getting the house is just not living in reality. To argue against it, to be angry about it. I honestly had none of those emotions. I was just like, "Oh, this is reality, and it's disappointing to me that this is the
Well, it's
reality."
like a
But
very victim mentality when people have that.
yeah, which I sometimes have a hard time with that word, the victim word. I don't know
I
why. It's been, like,
literally
a little
knew
bit, like, I
as
know.
soon as it left my mouth, I knew you had a problem with it.
I know. It's not it's not that I have a problem with that. I don't know, sometimes I think that word is just weaponized. I feel like I've heard it used in, like, a way to, like, diminish someone's worth or, like, to say, like, "Oh, you're being a victim," or, like, things
Or
like
it's
that, or to
invalidating.
invalidate yeah, to invalidate their feelings. And I do think there's a time and a place to be angry about something, and sometimes that is your response. But it's crazy to me because Ian and I had this experience recently. In one day, we witnessed a couple things where we were just like, I forgot that people do things like that. And I haven't been on social media a long time. So I also am not just watching random videos where people, maybe get in an altercation and yell at each other and stuff like that. I am seeing, I guess, less of that in my life because I'm not as exposed to it. Maybe, but and at a point in my life, I have been that person. So I'm not, Dean and I
Well,
have
it's
had
like
plenty of screaming
loud
matches.
yelling at somebody. It's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
somebody loudly shouting and angry, like they were going to get in a fight, but it was in a parking lot, a public parking lot. It's like,
We were walking
you
out of the
know,
gym and it struck me and I was like, wow, I think sometimes I forget that we still all have different coping mechanisms. And for that person, sometimes our coping mechanism at the stage that we are in our development is to blame a person or to let out our big emotions like my toddlers do on other people around them. And it's very normal developmentally to do that at that age. And then at my age, my coping mechanisms look different. So it is kind of crazy to see a grown adult screaming at another adult because you're so dysregulated and clearly you don't have coping mechanisms or whatever. But it's just like you can obviously see this person's having a hard time accepting reality. And
mhm.
I think that's oftentimes what we're doing. We're trying to kind of push against it in some way. And I think I just don't have the energy anymore to do that. I'm trying to just feel what I actually am feeling. And then also accepting responsibility for my part in accepting reality. And then also knowing where I'm sometimes I do want to blame something. And maybe the most that ever comes out in me is with my husband because that is my safety in so many ways. And so I think that maybe I do have moments with him where, yeah, I will kind of maybe blame him or whatever for something. And maybe sometimes it is true. But I think that there's also even a way to acknowledge someone else's responsibility in something and to express pain without being cruel and screaming in someone's face.
Yeah, I agree. I think also knowing that you can make I statements or list things like they're yours. And I think I have learned that. I was telling you how the last boy I really liked, I texted and was so just reactive, so protective of myself.
Mhm.
And instead of saying, hey, I'm feeling this, I actually desire this and this with you. And what a compliment that is, instead of being like,
Yeah, and it
you did
requires
this, you're
vulnerability.
that, I'm this.
Totally.
And yeah, it is scary, but you know
It's
what?
scarier
I
almost
would
than
have been,
blaming.
yes, because now I'm sitting here still so many months later being like, "Man, I wish I would have acted differently." Whereas, like, if you
Mhm.
are vulnerable and you say how you feel, I've just never regretted telling somebody how I authentically feel, no matter how embarrassing it was or how stupid I
Yeah.
looked or whatever. I don't think you look stupid. It's if it's real for you, it's real for you. There's a reason for that. And so, I
Yeah.
think that's why also I think choosing love anyway, for me, one of the biggest ways is to be curious about the things that are happening around me, whether they're good, whether they're bad.
Yeah.
What can I do more of when the good things happen? Why is this happening, or how did I get here? What can I work on? And I think what you're explaining also is faith, just not seeing
Mm.
something to believe, but believing in something that you cannot see and just trusting that. And as you were saying, how you let go of so much control, I'm thinking about how, yeah, I think that it's hard for you because with the girls, you're constantly surrendering. And I
Oh, yeah,
admire that
totally.
so much about you. So I think you've kind of applied that to every aspect of your life. So the house kind of feels hard to be like, you kind of know, like, the neural pathway is already built to
Yeah, that's
go
such an
there.
interesting point that I just have to accept what is. Like, this is what is, and I literally have barely any control. The most control I have in something is putting in an offer, and I'm just not willing to play a game, right? I also am not someone who has the ability to do a cash offer on anything, right? Like, that's just not the reality of my life. So then, okay, so what is the reality of my life? I have to accept that reality. And sure, you could just not accept the reality of your life, but I think it's kind of hard that way. Like,
I
I
think it's a
think
lot of suffering that way, and like,
totally.
you're constantly like, it's you against the world, and I'm like, the universe or God, whatever you believe in, I think it's always on your side. And I think that, also, not to diminish or invalidate, but I think
Yeah.
that sometimes we don't understand things until later. We can't see the big picture yet, and so I always remind myself of those
Yeah.
things. Everything really does change moment to moment.
It
That's
totally does.
for
You
better
could
or for
believe that it
worse.
can, yeah. But I do think that if you can believe that it can be different, something that Dean and I have been focusing on in our relationship too, and we'll talk about this in a future episode about our trip and things like that. But I think it's just believing that the future is unwritten. That's one of my words for the year. If it's unwritten, then I actually don't know. I could have a best guess. And what do I want it to be? Do I want it to be
Mhm.
beautiful? Do I believe that it could be beautiful? Do I think I can choose love anyway right here? What would that look like? And could it be different? And yeah, I think also sometimes you were saying that you think everything happens for a reason. And I do think that's true. I have a belief of that. But then also, I think that sometimes I think we want a reason and we even want to believe that so that it's easier to accept the discomfort because it's like, well, it has a reason. But also, sometimes things just happen. And that's what's hard, I think, about the world too. I have a hard time sometimes saying, and I think we talked about this in that episode about how it's hard sometimes to be like, well, everything is working together for my good. That's something that I repeat to myself. That's one of my tools, reminding myself of that. Every phase starts and ends. Even with my daughters, like when I'm in a hard phase, I'm always reminded this phase will end, and that's for good or bad. Sometimes that's great that a phase ends, but sometimes it's really sad. So the good phases end and the bad phases end. And I don't mean to put things in good or bad, but I guess I should say the more easy, joyful phases and the harder, challenging phases, they all end. I should reframe
Yeah.
that.
It's like constantly a flow, ebb and flow between the 2. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I guess that the point that I'm trying to make is that there's a lot of really hard and painful things that are happening in the world, and I think that that day I wasn't just sad about the house. I think it was a compacted thing. I think that's what we've been talking about too. Is it wasn't just that I was sad because honestly, that's not really like that's disappointing, but I was sad about the different painful, terrible things that are happening in our country, in the world. Then I was sad about you leaving. There was those things that were weighing
Sad
on
for Lucy,
sad
yeah,
for Lucy because
just
she was sick and sad for you that you were sick too, and then also knowing that I'm leaving this place and, like, moments are ending here. I think that it was a lot of emotions, and I think sometimes we feel things and we think it's the one thing that's right in front of us, but most likely it's like there's been probably 5 things that have added to the feeling you're feeling, and when you explode, if you don't feel the feeling in the moment and it comes out of you or you feel it in overwhelm, I think it's usually a lot of emotions, and that's why
mhm,
it's hard to actually blame one person for something because that moment you might let it all out, but really it's been building up. Just even
yeah.
with relationships, when you were saying you were talking to this boy and you kind of expressed these feelings, he wasn't the first one to make you feel those fears. Those fears had been building up, and then you came
Mhm.
that whole moment was a bigger moment because it was
It was
fueled
something
by past
happening again.
experiences, yes,
Yeah.
and it was fueled by past experiences of you having an experience over and over again. So it really didn't have so much to do with him as it is that you've had this experience that you believe this one truth and you're acting from that place versus believing that doesn't have to be the
Well,
reality of your life.
this is just a little side note, but I think that in relation to what you're saying, I think that's why it felt so sad because I had done so much work, but it was still so fresh. I just ended things with my ex-husband again for like the last time. And there was a lot of emotions. I
Right.
think something from also being a wife, you don't
Mhm.
really know exactly. I was, again, like how you said, with Derek, he's your safety person. Well, I had a safety person, so I don't know how I wasn't very kind. Like there was
Yeah.
that was part of the divorce was I feel like I wasn't with somebody who helped me learn how to regulate or inspired me to learn how to regulate.
Mhm.
And so I
Yeah.
just kept it was somebody that would enable my bad behavior almost by not helping like not that it's his
But it's also not
responsibility.
his responsibility. It's nobody's
I
really
know,
responsibility, yeah.
but I always say, I think when you like somebody or respect someone enough, it does inspire you to change and grow. Like you inspire me, my friends inspire me. So I
Yeah.
just didn't have that. And so I think this time, this boy did inspire that in me. And so it was like,
Mhm.
whoa, okay, like I don't ever want to repeat this again. And it was like, I so didn't like how I felt. And I always say this that life will, and everyone can have their own different beliefs, but I do believe that life often will give you the same test or like lesson over and over again until you respond differently or you learn whatever you were meant to learn from that. And so I think it's not like you can fail any test. I think it just means you have more experiences to go through. And so for
Yeah.
whatever reason, I actually had so much more to go through. And it's funny, I got this thing that was like completion today for my pattern app that was like,
Oh.
congratulations, the last 9 months have probably been miserable for you. Like, you probably have grown so much and you've learned a lot, and, like,
Okay, but also
congratulations,
shout
things
out to Pattern App if you haven't and you're an astrology girly or boy, we accept it, everybody here. You should get the Pattern App because it's amazing. Same with we'll say a couple apps like Align, Pattern.
I really like I now went back on my CoStar thing, I kinda
Oh,
like
you
it, but that thing can really be really brutal, but I like it.
okay,
I
but
feel like
also
it's
tell us
really
I didn't
very
mean to
relatable.
cut you off, so please tell us about the Pattern App and what happened today. I it
Oh,
just
just that, like,
so
it was
funny.
so relatable because yesterday and today I was talking to Brooke and I was, like, telling her and something happened yesterday that I'll, like, tell you off
Oh,
the record about, but it's so
great.
funny how ironic it was to my actual life. It was just,
Mm.
like, one of those divine things that, like, when I was saying, like, all the dots are just connecting in front of you and you're like, "Okay." And so I really felt like something did end. I finally did let go of something yesterday, and I did, like, open up in a way that I haven't before, and it was beautiful, and I don't know that I would have done that if the last 9 months didn't happen, and so it was
Yeah.
this really beautiful thing, so, like, seeing that today, I was just laughing at it. Anyway, so I guess my point is, I think being responsible is being responsive versus reactive. Feels a little more
Yeah.
irresponsible, feels a little more harsh. I think that sorry, it's, like, getting dark here, so I think my thing is getting dark, but,
Yeah.
anyways, I know we said our podcast episodes are also gonna be, like, 30 minutes long, we're gonna try to keep it there, but I think we're gonna have to just say 30 to 45 minutes because
Yeah.
we love to chat, and also we haven't talked in so long, I feel like we're, like, also kinda catching up
Yeah,
a
it
little
is. It
bit,
is that too, yeah. But
which
also we can stop here soon and talk about our trip because I do feel like we're kind of
yes.
getting there. So, but
Yeah.
you finish your current thought.
No, I was just saying that I think that to be reactive often entails going through the same things over and over again because you're kind of trying to play God or you want control and
Totally.
predictability. And so I think life has a beautiful but kind of harsh way sometimes of putting us through the same scenarios to remind us the things that we can control and then the things that we can't control. And so it's like you did
Mhm.
everything for that house. You will never look back and be like, I think we could have done more. Like you knew.
Yeah.
So at that point, I think when people are like, well, did I do enough? Did I do enough? Well, if you did the best that you could in that moment and you did all that you know you could, you know that you knew what you were able to send in or offer, you maxed out on that. So then if it still doesn't work out, then you you have this peace knowing that okay, then that truly wasn't meant for me, you know?
Totally, yes, that piece is nice to know, but it's hard when you're still looking and you're like, but I really love that one, so then that's not for me." And, it's hard 'cause there is a little bit of a physical kind of aspect to this where, like, I can see what it is, but it's the same thing that you're talking about faith here. It is like having faith that what you thought was really great, if you believe that, that God wants the very best for you, right? And that to choose love anyways, to choose the most beautiful reality for yourself, then it's like, then there must be something better than that, which is almost I laugh even saying that because it's like, really,
No,
there
but
is?
I agree, there is, because
Yeah,
that's our relationship, right? And I
yeah,
was saying that, I'm like, even which we'll talk about this in another episode, but, like, the fact that there are things that truly they're different, they're not this, like, big, gigantic, so much better than I could have imagined, but they're so different in the best way possible than what you could have
yeah,
imagined. Like, I think for
yeah.
our relationship, I hope that we could have a trip where we didn't fight, that could have been my minimum. Like, if one day, like, my imagined mind is just like, we will have one trip where we don't fight, and that now it's like, I see we can have disagreements. We can open up to each other. We can fight, but it's not even a fight. We are so regulated. Like, we're not just not fighting because sometimes not fighting means you're suppressing. So like we can be completely ourselves and regulate and talk about everything and have more love for ourselves and the world and each other through this. It's like, wow, okay, so all I gave to whoever like put out there is I just want to not fight, but then you get like 50 other things that you didn't know you had. And so I think going back to like you don't have it's not something you're checking off a list. I think there's
Yeah,
something magical about that because oftentimes the lists are so limiting. Like are
totally.
and can you have a list and be like, this is just my preference right now, but I'm open to whatever
Yeah,
a
yeah,
bigger list than
absolutely.
mine is.
Yeah, yeah. And I think to your point too, the thing that you're talking about with conflict, I think it's really interesting because there's this thing, one of my favorite podcasts, Faith Matters. I love just the things they talk about, like just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful episodes and content and the intention that they put into it. But
I'm gonna turn this light on. Okay.
perfect piece, but one of they have a bunch of authors too, like they publish books too. And then they have a podcast that's underneath their umbrella, their podcast called Proclaim Peace, and I actually think they might have changed the name, but it was really interesting because something they talked about a lot was that to be a peacemaker in the world isn't to not have conflict with anyone. It's how you have the conflict, right? And even some of my favorite marriage therapists are always saying like, you know, i- it's actually not good to have no conflict in your marriage because then like you're agreeing on everything. That's kind of most likely you're two different people. Someone isn't actually being completely open and honest, right?
Mhm.
About if you're agreeing on everything. I mean, it's just we are all different souls. There has to be things that we are different in, right? Like that's just
Mhm.
the reality of life. So
Yeah.
it's how you have the conflicts though. And I think you and I thought that like in a perfect relationship, you will have no conflict because we had so much conflict growing up. But even that
Mhm.
conflict, when I look back at it, everything could have been done because as I watch and teach my toddlers to express what they feel that isn't a comfortable feeling, it's like saying someone hurt their feelings, but doing it in a respectful way. I realize that any conversation, if two people are willing to have integrity and honor for themselves and the person in front of them and choose love anyway, I think this is what it means to me, then you can say anything. You can have
Mhm.
any disagreement about something, and your worth and value as a human being does not have to come into play about it. That's what I think, because that's where the hurt and the pain comes in. But yeah, sorry, I
Yeah,
just feel like I
that's
went on.
beautiful. No, I really love that because again, it goes back to like knowing that there will be hard times, knowing that you will have disagreements, knowing that you will be let down. And I think they also say this about your spouse is like they will let you down. And so like you will
And
be
that's
let
actually the
down
job.
in this
That's our job.
process.
Yeah. Sorry, I totally spoke over you. So say that again.
No, just that you will be let down in this process. And so I also just want to say that going back to the original question of like, how did you cope with this? What are
Hmm.
your tools? I think just listing off also some of the, not just the mindset tools, but the physical tools is like you are more gentle with yourself. You're a lot
Hmm.
softer. You were vocal. You were vocal with me, with Derek, with the girls. Like, hey, I'm just feeling really down. So I'm sorry, I'm a little low energy and then you took a nap and we went on a walk, you just moved slowly and, um, I don't remember if we went to the gym or not, but if we did, we were very gentle, like, we
Totally.
just did everything with that in mind because I think just like a readiness score on your Oura Ring or whatever, sometimes I think your readiness score goes up and down throughout the day too, moment to moment, and so I think just I wanted to touch on that because as we wrap this up, that is, um I think that's just really good and refreshing and freeing to have in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really beautiful place to like pause this episode and say, this is where we were at. This is how we moved through that.
Okay, well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to wrap up the episode there, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Bye.